Lumina gives two types of products and services to owner-managers. One being transaction advisory, which is either buying or selling, and the other being funding solutions, which is either debt or equity. In terms of the value that we add, we deal directly with the shareholders, and each transaction is specific and bespoke depending on the objective of the shareholders and depending on the objectives of the company. The generic model in terms of how that process is run is understanding the objectives, which is at the planning stage, where we talk about what looks like a good outcome. The next stage is the detailed modeling and understanding of the business and the dynamics of the business, how investors would perceive that business, how an acquirer would perceive that business if you're selling, for example, and how to present that business in the best possible light and structure that business to get the most value for the shareholders. Now, when people talk about value, we are not purely talking about monetary value, which goes back to the planning stage, where you're actually looking at what are the objectives of the shareholders. And quite often in private companies, you will have varying objectives. For example, if you have a shareholder who is at or near retirement age, might have very different objectives to a shareholder who is in their late 30s, for example, and may want to take the business forward to the next stage of growth. So understanding those objectives and structuring the transaction to achieve those objectives is paramount and is very, very key to the transaction. And that's where we believe that we distinguish ourselves in that understanding, by bringing that experience to the table through senior level involvement in the transaction. The phase after the modeling phase and the objectives and the structuring phase is to actually run a process to the market for a sell side or to the market for a capital raising, be that debt or equity, with very, very clear terms and conditions, which we have already due diligenced internally that we know would be acceptable or within the parameters of acceptability, so that there is a document, there is a structured process upon which the investors or buyers have confidence in structuring an offer or presenting an offer. And at that point, we can then analyze those offers and take one or two parties forward towards completion. But the important thing in this whole process is the experience of Lumina in advising the shareholders of what will and won't be acceptable, having advised on the other side and having been on the other side in several transactions. We bring that to bear to structure a transaction that is executable, that will meet the shareholders' objectives. And a lot of transactions, if you look at them, particularly in the region, fall over due to lack of structuring, lack of understanding of the market, and lack of presenting a structured proposition that a buyer or an investor can actually invest in. And this quite often creates a process that is iterative in nature, doesn't go anywhere, and both parties eventually suffer from what we call deal fatigue, and the deal never gets done. So it's very, very important to go through that plan, model, market, close process and take the shareholders and take the company through that process. It gives confidence not only to the shareholders, not only to the company, but to the buyers, to the investors, that this is a professionally, properly run process and we are serious about doing a transaction.